Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Shame Resilience webinar. I really appreciate you joining us today. I first want to let you know that if you are viewing the recorded version of this webinar while I figure out how to further automate the system, I just need, upon completion of viewing the webinar, just email me, please, at staysober@bobtyler.net. And I will send you the post-test and survey. And then once you complete that and send it to me, I'll verify that you viewed it and then send you your CEH certificate, okay? So anyway, thanks again for joining us. By way of introduction to this talk, I have for years talked about the importance of talking to another person in recovery when we experience uncomfortable feelings like shame and others, or if we have a craving. And it really does need to be somebody who's in recovery, because nobody, like another alcoholic, can really truly understand just how sensitive alcoholics and addicts are, how intolerant of emotion we tend to be, and how, despite all the evidence I have that it's not a good idea for me to drink or use, how I can somehow make it sound like a good idea. Only another alcoholic can really understand that. And so I have really been stressing the importance of that, and I've also stressed the importance of it in my private practice. And one of the things that in working with clients, we talk about how we need to develop resilience. Whereas maybe in early recovery, a cue from our environment can trigger our shame or our past any past trauma, and we just get knocked right off of our adult center and we overreact, and it feels way worse than what the situation actually calls for. And so in recovery, as we learn tools of recovery, as we learn how to actually be able to feel and experience shame, we become more resilient to it, and we kind of are able to recognize better the environmental cues and triggers to our shame and other uncomfortable feelings. And so we develop resilience. And so I came up with this term, shame resilience. I'm like, what a great term. So I Googled it to see, is it out there? And sure enough, Brene Brown, if you've ever heard of her, has something called shame resilience theory. I'm like, doggone it, I thought I invented something, but she already came up with it. So it really interested me in her work. And if you've never seen or heard of Brene Brown's work, I highly recommend it. A good starting point would be just go to YouTube and search for Brene Brown or her TED Talks. I think she has one called The Power of Vulnerability. It's just such good stuff. And so anyway, in researching her work again and viewing those videos, I came across something that a conclusion that she made through her research. And the conclusion that she came to is empathy is the antidote for shame. I've been teaching for years that there's no better tool of recovery than getting on the phone with another alcoholic who can truly understand what you're going through. But I've been teaching this really anecdotally. I don't have any research to back it up, only experience, both personal experience and experience of working with other alcoholics and addicts. And so this research seemed to validate that, that she says that empathy is the antidote for shame. So getting on the phone with somebody who can truly understand what I'm going through, somebody who can provide that that validation and that understanding, and their willingness to kind of sit in that pain with me. There's just nothing better for to get through the experience. She says that me too is the two best words anybody in their shame can hear. So I just thought, man, and looking at her stuff, I was just like, gosh, this is just so good, and it matches up with the work that I'm doing so well. I just decided to go ahead and integrate some of her work into my talk, and so that was the birth of this shame resilience. I actually rolled out this talk at the CCAP conference last October 2018. I did a plenary session with this information, and it just went over really well. And so I'm going to do a webinar on this. Maybe someday I'll do a video, a training video or something too. I don't know. But anyway, so there's your not too brief introduction to this work. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is I mentioned how sensitive alcoholics and addicts are. They're just seem to be hypersensitive. They seem to have more feelings than most. In combination with that, alcoholics and addicts don't do feelings really well. The first instinct for an alcoholic or an addict when they get an uncomfortable feeling is run. I'm not going to sit here and feel this. Are you crazy? So what a lethal combination that is, right? We have more feelings than most, and we don't do them well. No wonder alcoholics and addicts run from uncomfortable emotion by drinking and using. So popular opinion is that in order for people to recover, they need to resolve all of those issues that lead to all those nasty emotions. I guess there might be some validity to this. I mean, let's just say I was Joe Counselor and I could spend some time with you and relieve you of all of your issues, which I'm not that guy, but let's just say I am. Well, what happens next week when you lose a relationship or something that particularly causes you some shame or some fear? As your therapist, I have to be walking around with you, resolving all these issues as you go. And remember, our job as counselors is to work ourselves out of a job with our clients. So I really believe that what is primary in chemical dependence treatment is not resolving the issues as much as it is helping our clients to learn how to feel and experience the uncomfortable emotions that come from those issues. Now, in the work that we do we resolve issues? Do they end up with some, problem solving and skills and issue resolution? Of course, but it's really secondary to teaching our clients how to feel and experience uncomfortable emotion. And the resolution of issues, I say, comes more like in therapy after treatment or toward the end of primary treatment if your facility happens to have trained therapists. That's where more of the resolution of issues happens. But our job, we're trying to stop the bleeding. We're trying to get them to be able to get through this early recovery without drinking and using. And in order to be able to do that, I say that they need to learn how to feel and experience uncomfortable emotion while using the tools of recovery so that they can stay sober long enough to be able to maybe do some of that deeper work, okay? So this author, Lamia, I really like this person's definition of shame. So Lamia says that as a self-conscious emotion, shame informs us of an internal state of inadequacy, unworthiness, honor, regret, or disconnection. And remember that term disconnection, because you'll see that as a common theme here as we look at Brown's work. So Lamia also states that another person or a circumstance can trigger the shame. So it can be another person or something that happens in our environment that can trigger it. But it also can be a failure to meet our own ideals and standards. And this often comes from our childhood. So if our primary caregivers had maybe some unreachable expectations of us, and we go through life trying to meet those unreachable expectations, those unreachable expectations that have been imposed on us by others eventually kind of transfer to our expectations and unreasonable expectations of achievement and meeting these ideals and standards maybe that we've taken from our childhood. So it is important to know that it can be triggered from our environment, but it also can just be triggered by stuff that our own ideal and standards and things that we bring to our adulthood and not reaching our own expectations of ourselves. And so Lamia also says that given that shame leads us to feel as though our whole self is flawed, bad, or subject to exclusion, is that reference of kind of disconnection, exclusion, it motivates us to hide or to do something to save face. So the alcoholic or addict can't just sit there. It's just so uncomfortable. We need to either run and hide, or we need to act or something to protect ourselves. And so it's no wonder that shame avoidance can lead to withdrawal or to addictions that attempt to mask its impact. You know, I like to look at shame as just, you know, feeling unworthy, disgraceful, inferior, less than, just this feeling that one doesn't measure up. And at its extreme, the person can just feel absolutely worthless, that it was, you know, their life has no meaning and it was really a mistake to put them on this earth. So many authors and speakers have distinguished between guilt and shame. A woman by the name of Pia Melody, who worked at a program in Arizona, I don't know if she's retired or not yet, but she used to say, and I'll clean it up a little bit, that guilt is when you know your poop stinks, and shame is when everybody else does. I actually like this definition better, that guilt is the uncomfortable feeling one gets when you do something bad, and shame is the uncomfortable feeling you get when you believe that you are bad. Now, this is important because you might get a question like this on your post test. So shame is the uncomfortable feeling you get when you feel like you are bad, right? So guilt is, you know, is this uncomfortable feeling like I did something bad and it you know, and I feel guilty. I have regret based on the action that was done. But shame is this overwhelming feeling of, man, not only did I do something bad, I am bad. Now, Brown says that shame is correlated with all these nasty things: addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide. So there's really not much redeeming value with shame. We do need to feel it. It is a human emotion that we have, but we need to deal with it. But it's not because it's like this great feeling and we want shame. Interestingly, Brown says that guilt is inversely associated with these things. So she says that it's highly adaptive to hold something we've done against who we want to be. So you know, we have certain you know, things that we believe is the right thing to do. We have certain morals and certain values, and so if we act against what we believe is the right thing to do, against, you know, our morals, against our values, it causes a tension, right? And guilt, it's a tension that we experience when what we're doing isn't matching up with what we believe is the right thing to do. And so that uncomfortable feeling of guilt, because of this separation between what I'm doing and what I believe is the right thing, it causes us to change our behavior to bring it more in line with what we believe is the right thing. So this separation, this tension that's caused between what I'm doing and what I believe is the right thing, and when they don't match up, in psychological terms, we can call it cognitive dissonance. It's just this tension. And addicts and alcoholics in early recovery, we just can't afford that kind of tension. And so it really is something to pay attention to listen to that guilt, to that uncomfortable feeling, and really having a look at is what I'm feeling guilty about. Did I go against what I believe is the right thing? And if so, then I can change my behavior and I can bring what I believe is the right thing to do in line with my actions. And there's just a peace and a congruity that is established then, and we have more of a sense of relief and things feel right. So guilt actually has some value because it changes our behavior. It moves it in line with what we believe is the right thing. So many people have deep-rooted shame that stem from childhood messages. So in this section, we're going to kind of get into you know, some of the sources of shame, like where does it come from? And one of the primary things is from our childhood. And so, you know, if you constantly receive messages growing up that you don't measure up or that you're a piece of junk, you really grow up believing it. And let's face it, you know, these messages are coming from our primary caregivers, the people that, you know, showed us how to use the potty, how to walk, maybe how to ride a bike, how to use a spoon, right? They were right about all that stuff. Well, why wouldn't they be right about this? So these consistent messages, as we're forming opinions about the world and about ourselves, if we're constantly getting these negative messages about ourselves, we really go into adulthood believing that stuff. And this isn't just like some surface belief. These are beliefs that are to our very core, right? It's like in our DNA. Even evidence to the contrary is ignored because we really deep down know that we don't measure up, that we're not worth much, that we don't have value, that I'm not worthy of connection. And so, you know, I talk about how, you know, you can, let's say you're, maybe some of you can relate to this. Let's just say you're in a room full of 10 people. And not that we really have any business doing an inventory of the room to see what the acceptance level is, but I tell you, I used to do this, where I'd be in a room full of 10 people, and let's just say, I feel like, you know, I got a pretty good rating in here. About nine out of the 10 people really feel like I'm an okay dude. But there's that one person who's just kind of eyeballing me, and I'm getting the impression from them that they're just kind of sizing me up, and they go, I got your number. I know, you know, we both know that you're not really all that. And so when I'm experiencing that kind of situation, do you think I focus on the 90% of the people in the room who think I'm okay? Or do I focus on that one? Yeah, me too. I focus on that one. And not only would I focus on that one, but I would try to turn that person around about me, right? By either, you know, kind of changing who I am, or maybe saying or doing things that I might think would get this person's approval, and try to turn them around about me. And if I left that situation and I wasn't able to turn that person around about me, it would be like, see, there it is. I'm ignoring the 90%. There it is. There's further proof of the fact that I just don't measure up and I'm not good enough. I mean, isn't that kind of crazy? I mean, I ignore the 90% and latch on to that 10%. That's what I mean when we believe this to our very core and we ignore evidence to the contrary and focus on that evidence that really is the reality of what we know about ourselves. And so in that way, shame really has its roots in low self-esteem. So let's kind of sidetrack a little bit over into self-esteem. So self-esteem is like good feelings about ourselves that come from ourselves, right? So when I have high self-esteem, I'm able to draw good feelings about me from me, all right? People with low self-esteem, they don't get good feelings about themselves from themselves, right? So what do they have to do? They have to get it from their environment. So people with low self-esteem tend to become people pleasers, you know, social chameleons, if you will. Like, you know, they change their colors according to their environment. So they could be with like one group of people over here, maybe from a certain, I don't know, ethnicity or socioeconomic background, or they have certain values, certain ways of talking, certain ways of having fun. And the person with low self-esteem will take on those values. They will act in ways that they can be accepted by that group. They'll take on their values. They'll take on their ways of having fun. They'll often, even sometimes inadvertently, like start talking like them so that they can be accepted by that group. Now, they could be in a completely different group of people over here, completely maybe opposite end of the socioeconomic stratum, different ethnicity, different ways of having fun, different values, and they will change who they are to become part of that group and take on those values and ways of having fun and ways of talking, you know, and so that they can be accepted by that group. So, and I'm one of those people, I unfortunately, I admit. And so I'll tell you, by the time I got to recovery, I had no clue who that guy even was, because I was too busy being who you wanted me to be. So I really lost my identity in trying to be who I thought other people wanted me to be so that I could be accepted and gain connection with these people. So I want to run through some self-esteem building techniques that I find are really helpful to give our clients, excuse me. And there's also kind of a counselor wellness aspect to this self-esteem building section. And the reason is because I used a lot of this stuff in my early counseling years. Unfortunately, I will admit to you that I got into this profession too soon. I was 9 months sober when they let me come into the Alcohol and Drug Studies program. I finished the program at about 2 years of sobriety and was actually given my first group at about that period of time. So I was not the healthiest person. Now, I worked a really good, strong recovery program, but I still had some pretty, some issues, and in particular in regards to self-esteem. And because of that, there was a pretty sick dynamic going on. Now, I'm not saying I was a really bad counselor, but there was really kind of a sick dynamic going on, and which was this, that I put too much credence into the feedback that I got from my clients into rating how I did as a professional. Now, this doesn't mean, I'm not suggesting that we don't listen to our clients, because our clients can give us valuable information and we want to take that in, but I'm talking to the extreme. So for instance, I got somebody after a group comes up to me and says, Bob, I just don't think you're doing a very good job. I feel like you completely lost control of that group. I feel like you let such and such talk for too long. They kind of dominated the group. I feel like one client, just looked like you were particularly impatient with them. And then at one point, you seemed like you mentally just left the group, and then all of a sudden came back, and you didn't even realize what was going on in the group, whatever it was, right? Somebody might relate to some of those things. So what would I do with that information? I would go here. Oh my God, this person has finally found me out. What the heck was I thinking getting into this profession? I'm no good at this. And then not only would I go there, but I would have this desire. I couldn't wait to get back into the group so I could prove myself worthy of working in this profession. Are you kidding me? How sick is that? Based on what one perhaps sick client was saying about my performance, I was questioning whether or not I even belonged in this profession. And you can't do that when you're in our profession, because we need to be able to intervene and deal with clients in the way that we think is going to best benefit them, not to best get feedback from them, right? So on the contrary, let's say I got some feedback from a client says, Bob, you are just the best counselor. I'm so glad I ended up in your group. Boy, you have just really saved my life. What would I do with that information? Play the Rocky music, baby. I have arrived, right? And I'd go to the moon with this, and I would be ecstatic based on, again, what one perhaps sick client said about the job that I'm doing, right? So it didn't come from me, it came just from my client, and I would just take their word for the job that I did, just because I didn't have any sense of, I didn't have the ability to get good feelings about me from me, so I had to get it from my environment. The clients were right there in my environment telling me how I should feel about me. Yeah, sick, I know. So anyway, so here's some things that I did that really helped me with that. And so one was creating the Bob filter. You can put your name in front of the title. You don't have to call your filter the Bob filter. So it's this filter that we use where we can take information from our environment and run it through our filter to see what we think about the feedback. So somebody says, Bob, I don't think you did a very good job in group. They give me all those reasons why. And then I say, Bob, this person doesn't think you did a very good job in group. What do you think? And I'll go, well, you know what? Some of those things he mentioned, I get it, and I don't think I did that great of a job there. Yeah, I feel like if I had it to do over, I wouldn't have let such and such talk for so long, but maybe I was a little codependent and didn't want to, hurt their feelings. Yeah, and this one client, there's some kind of counter-transference going on or something like that, and yeah, I feel like I wasn't as patient as I could have been, or yeah, I came to group, I was kind of distracted, and yeah, I wasn't fully present for the group for that whole time. So I didn't really do a very good job in that group. So I'm not going to let myself feel that great about that, and I'll just try to do better next time. You see the difference between that and that downward spiral of what was I thinking getting into this profession, and they have finally found me out? Yeah, it's a big difference, So it was just like, okay, yeah, I agree with some of what was said there, and I'm going to try to do a better job next time. None of that was about whether or not I belonged in this profession. It was more like I had a bad day. Okay. So now, if I am going to run the negative feedback through the Bob filter, I got to run positive feedback through it too, don't I? So this person thinks I did a really good job in group. They give me all the reasons why. Oh, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So I might agree with that negative feedback. However, I might run it through and say, Bob, this person doesn't think you did a very good job in group. What do you think? And I might, in looking back, going, I actually think I did a pretty good job in that group. In fact, I did a really good job in that group. Now, I can see why that person might have been uncomfortable with what happened in there, but I think that was exactly what that group needed. And I think they're going to benefit from this. And I stand behind the job that I did, and I would do it again. Yeah, it's a bummer this person doesn't think I did that great of a job, but you know what? I think I did do a good job, so I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to feel good about that. Wait, what? I actually turned a feedback from a client into actually good feelings about the job that I did, feelings that came from within, feelings that came from me. Wow. So I found this to be a hugely valuable tool. So like I said, if I'm going to take the negative feedback from my clients and run it through the Bob filter, I also have to take the positive feedback and run it through. So this person thinks I did a good job in group. Bob, what do you think? I might agree. I might go, this person thinks I did a good job. Here's the reasons that they brought up. And you know what? I think they're right. I did a darn good job in that group. And I might come up with more reasons why. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to feel good about that. Do you see the difference between that and play the Rocky music, baby, I have arrived? No, I took feedback from the client and asked myself and checked it out with myself to see whether or not I agreed with it. And based on whether or not I agreed with it was how I was going to feel about it. And I thought I did a good job, so I allowed myself to go ahead and feel good about it. From within, self-esteem, good feelings about me that I get from me. Now, I might disagree. I might go, this person thinks I did a pretty good job in group. What do you think? Well, I don't really think I did do a very good job in that group, and here's the reasons why. So if I had to do differently, this is what I would have done. So it's cool they think I did a good job in there, but I'm just not going to allow myself to feel that great about it. So I'm really checking any feedback, and this isn't just like at work or the work that we do. We're teaching our clients that whatever feedback they get from their environment, they don't have to take it at face value. They can actually check it out with them and run it through themselves. It's like, I don't think you did very good in disciplining your kid, or I don't think you're really trying very hard in this class. Maybe getting that from an instructor. Whatever the environment is, we check it out to see what our reality is with it, and then we feel about it accordingly. Okay, and based on how we feel about us, rather than what somebody else feels about us. Okay, so then there's pointing the headlights in, and so as I said, I was pretty much a social chameleon, and this is very common for people with low self-esteem and alcoholics and addicts, and so it was like I had the headlights out. It was like, I'm looking for in my environment for how I should be feeling about me. It's like, oh, so you got some positive feedback for me? Okay, keep going. Okay, is that it? Okay, let me go to the next. Okay, do you got anything? No? Okay, let me go over here. Okay, here's some positive strokes. So it's like I'm just going through my environment looking for evidence of my worth, right? And it was pretty consistent. So a therapist that I had actually had me what we call turn the headlights in, right? So the headlights, instead of being out, are in. And he had me actually spend 9 minutes a day just focusing on me, right? Just focusing on me and my strengths, my values, and so get in a quiet place where there's no distractions and just focus on me. And I got to tell you, this is one of the hardest things I ever did, because I never did anything like this. I was always focused on my environment. I never had to look within. So at first it was just like, I just kind of had to look at myself and go like, okay, am I hungry? No. Am I thirsty? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Am I tired? Yeah, I'm a little tired. And then I think in subsequent sessions, I then moved to, okay, what do I want? Like, what is it that I want in life? What are the things that I want? And so I just focused on that, just almost like a meditation on that. And then I think I eventually, through this process, I graduated to like, what are my strengths? What are my values? And so I did this for the better part of about 4 or 5 weeks. And And do you know what happened? I actually found out who the heck Bob was. Remember, I told you when I got to recovery, I had no clue who I was because I was too busy being who you wanted me to be. And through this process of just looking at myself and focusing on myself and what I believe, is the right thing, and my values and my strengths and what I want out of life, I actually gained some identity. I gained a consciousness of like who I was. It was a very, very valuable technique, and I would highly recommend it. And then private goal setting. So again, this is again a kind of a counselor wellness thing, if you will. So again, I told you that my primary source of how I did at work was from my clients, and but I would also get feedback maybe from a boss or a peer in regards to other areas of my performance. And so what I started doing before I would go into my shift is like I'd roll up and I'd stay in the car for a minute before I went up, and I would set some goals for that shift, and I wouldn't tell anybody about these goals. And so it might look something like this. Okay, on this shift, I'm going to try to, well, we use some of the examples that we used before. I'm going to try to do better at not letting people ramble on, and maybe create an avenue for myself to be able to cut them off by or refocusing them by saying that I may do that, because my job is to keep the group running efficiently. I'm going to try to be particularly patient with such and such client. Maybe I'll even talk about to my supervisor or to a peer about what appears to be maybe a countertransference thing, and I'm going to take 5 or 10 minutes and really get focused so that when I walk into group, I can be very present for them and try to stay present during the group, rather than my mind drifting off. So whatever and then another like example might be I'm going to try to. I have 3 treatment plans that I need to write today, and I'm going to try to write all 3 of those. Okay, so I have these goals. So that, and I don't tell anybody about them. So I get done with my shift, and then I get into my car, and before I roll off, I was like, okay, how did I do on my goals? And it might be like, okay, yeah, you were particularly patient with such and such client, and you, for most of the group, were very present for your clients, and you wrote 2 of your 3 treatment plans. So it wasn't perfect, but I actually succeeded in most of my goals, so I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to feel good about that. Again, wait, what? I just actually set it up to get some good feedback about my performance from me. I got, based on what I did and what the preparation I did before I went by setting my own achievable goals, I actually set it up to where I was able to feel good about the job that I did, independent of what my client said, independent of what any of my peers might think about the job I did, or even my supervisor, because I set certain goals and I succeeded in most of them, so I feel good about that. Great tool. Secret acts of kindness. So one of the most lousy, uncomfortable things that I learned about myself in therapy was when my counselor led me to the unfortunate observation that I never did anything for anybody without the express purpose of getting good positive strokes about myself. I did good things for people to get the positive feedback so I could feel good about myself, rather than altruistic motives, which were, I just have a desire to do something good for somebody else. I know it's a terrible thing to have to learn about yourself, but yeah, I was pretty selfish and self-centered. And I just felt so bad about myself. I did anything I could to try to get evidence of of me being worthwhile and a good person. And so, so what I started doing was secret acts of kindness. So I would do good things for people and not tell them that I did it. And so at first I was doing it because it was, kind of a counselor that I was working with kind of thought that that might be a good idea. And so I started doing that, and I wasn't telling anybody about it. And I kept doing it. And I really liked the feeling that I got of doing something good for somebody else and not getting the feedback. And it kind of was like, what a great feeling. It made me feel good about myself that I was that I wanted to do something good for somebody, and I actually did it. And just that by itself, without like having to get the feedback, it just gave me a good feeling, and it really helped to raise my self-esteem and my self-worth. So working the steps is another good self-esteem building tool. You know, if I'm, you know, I mean, we identify, you know, that we're powerless and our lives are manageable. We come to believe in some sort of, you know, higher power. And then we make this decision to turn over, you know, our will and our lives to that higher power. And then we do this, you know, we get to work with this, you know, moral inventory, where we basically are getting all the skeletons out of the closet and on paper, and then we share this information with God or higher power, another human being, and you know, and again, here's that like empathy thing that it seems that, you know, when I am sharing this information with another human being and I am still accepted and loved and validated, and they usually will share stuff back, there's just empathy results. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why that step is just so amazing and valuable, the fifth step of sharing that. And so, and then step 6, through that process, you know, we identify these character defects, these things that we, you know, don't like about ourselves, or things that like get us in trouble, or defenses and things that we've like used in this to survive in this world. And we, you know, step 7, we pray to have them removed. And in step 8, we make a list of everybody that we screwed over in our lives, and, you know, and make a decision to make amends. And then in step 9, we make direct amends. And so we clean the slate basically. And then in step 10, we, you know, keep the slate clean. I tell you, as I'm sharing this, it's like, my shoulders kind of drop, and I just get this kind of peace, because, boy, you know, to just wake up the next day knowing that I've done everything that I can to be the best Bob I can be, and then cleaning the slate and keeping it clean, boy, that's just good living. And when I do that, and when I do that consistently, there's just a good feeling about myself that I get from myself, independent of what anybody else thinks about me. And so there's a real strong self-esteem building part about working the step, result of working the steps. I've just actually filmed a 12-step video that we should be rolling out sometime this fall that I'm very excited about. So keep your ears open for that. So then identifying our values, strengths, our personal support system, achievable goals. This is kind of like, you know, the pointing the headlights in thing. There's a book, there's actually a required text when I did my alcohol and drug studies program. It was called How Do I Love Me? And it was basically this little thin book. It was from Helen Johnson, I believe, was the author, if you want to check it out. And it's a really good book to assign a client. It's just like this little workbook that, you know, they basically go through that helps them identify their strengths and values and support system. And then hanging out with sober support. So, you know, when you hang out with people who think that you're a good person or think that you're worthwhile, and they give you positive strokes, and you hang out with people like that, you eventually start to buy in. You know, early in my career, I was trying to create some hours for myself, and I created this questionnaire to go to the sober living homes in the community to see if we should be sending people to them. And in the women's recovery homes, there was this thing that I heard more than once, which is, we love them until they learn how to love themselves. And that just seems so significant to me, because you know what? If you hang out with people who are loving on you, you eventually start to buy in and start to love on yourself. And we really see that in recovery. So we want to encourage our clients to hang out with people. Don't be around people who don't make you feel good about yourself if you can avoid it. Be around people who make you feel good about yourself. And so that you can, it really helps with the self-worth and self-esteem. And then finally, affirmations, whether, you know, it's, you know, sitting in front of the mirror and saying, you know, good things about yourself, affirming yourself and your existence. You know, there's actually some apps out there that I highly recommend, where in these apps, it will actually text you daily an affirmation. It's awesome. Would highly recommend it for, you know, any person in recovery, and it would be a really great suggestion for our clients, in particular those who have low self-esteem. Okay, so there's our little self-esteem detour. So let's come back and remember, we're focusing on some of the sources of shame And we just talked about one source of shame, which is our upbringing. If we get consistent negative messages about ourselves, we start to believe that to our very core. Another way, and it's related, that Brown says, is that we try to perfect our children, right? Inadvertently, and being, good, with what we think of being good parents, and we want them to be the best, people they can be, and we put so much emphasis on, succeeding in certain tasks or events or whatever. We somehow give this message that if it's not number one, or there's room for improvement, that somehow that isn't enough, and here's what you have to do to be perfect or better. But Brown says that, our children are hardwired for struggle when they get here, and our job is not to make them perfect. Our message should be this: you are imperfect, wired for struggle, yet worthy of our love and belonging. Wow. I have to tell you that when I first read this, I was actually in a pretty good place, and when I read this quote, I just broke down. I just it was like this spontaneous combustion. I read that and I just started gushing. Because if I got that message when I was a child, if I got the message that it's okay to be imperfect and that I'm going to have difficulties, yet despite my imperfections, I'm still worthy of love and belonging of my parents, boy, my life would have been pretty different. It would have been a much more comfortable life. I wouldn't have had to spend half my life in therapy and trying to overcome this hardwired feeling that I have for myself, that I'm not good enough and I don't measure up. It would have been way different. So, so Brown says that, that needs to be the message. It's letting them know that despite their imperfections, that their imperfections are okay. And despite those imperfections, that's a normal state, right? And maybe it's because of our imperfections and our uniqueness as well. It makes us, we're worthy of love and belonging. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our job, according to Brown. She also studied two different groups: those who had a strong sense of love and belonging, and those who struggle for it, wondering if they're good enough. This shouldn't be a real surprise, but what she found is that the biggest difference is people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they're worthy of it, right? So she talks about them as being wholehearted people, that such folks had the courage to be imperfect and had compassion for themselves. So again, when we grow up, if it was okay to be imperfect, if our imperfections were embraced, that's just normal, that we don't have to be perfect, and who you are as a person is good enough, and that you're a wonderful, lovable person who belongs despite these imperfections that we have, then we grow up being able to let ourselves off the hook in regards to our imperfections. If our imperfections and how we were treated was that we, as we are, is not good enough, and we constantly were given the message that we needed to be better, in our adulthood, it's too scary to be imperfect. It doesn't feel right. We have to strive to be better. We can't be content with who we are. And it's hard to have compassion with ourselves unless we acted in this top-notch, first place, whatever kind of way. So she said, she calls these people that have gotten the message that imperfections are okay as wholehearted people, and these people do have the courage to be imperfect, and they are able to have compassion for themselves. And so another thing is that shame often arises when we do so many bad things. Like in our addiction, we tend to do some really bad things. Excuse me. And when we do so many bad things in our addiction, we start to believe that we're really bad people. That difference, guilt, I did something bad, shame, that I am bad. And I'll tell you, and this is related to the, making it okay to be imperfect, like we just talked about. An effective way to combat shame that arises in that way, where we do so much bad stuff, we start to believe that we are bad, is to realize that we're imperfect and that, we make mistakes. Look, I don't know what personal beliefs you have about what brought us into existence? I happen to believe that we were created by God, but other people have different ideas about that. But however you think that we were created or brought into this world, I don't get much pushback on the fact that normal people, like I know we throw around the term normal, but I mean, if you were created like everybody else, you are somebody who has imperfections, right? Like if you didn't have any imperfections, you'd be some kind of freak, wouldn't you? So if you are created as a normal human being in this world and you have imperfection, that actually makes you a perfect creation, not a bad person or somebody who doesn't measure up. Makes sense? So you can, you can consider yourself to maybe be perfectly imperfect. Perfectly imperfect. What a great term. Google it. Yeah, Brene Brown again. But I swear on this one, I came up with it first because I came up with that term years ago. So, yeah, I entertain myself here, don't I? I know you guys are all laughing, but I can't see you. It is a little weird, I'll tell you, not having a live audience right in front of me that I can see. It's somewhat of a challenge. So it doesn't. So if we're human beings and we're imperfect, it doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means we're normal people. Let me take another little detour here and talk about humility versus grandiosity, and you'll see the connection between the importance of learning to feel and experience uncomfortable emotions like shame. So humility, if you look it up in the dictionary, Webster's dictionary, it's a state or quality of being humble of mind or spirit. And humble is actually having or showing a consciousness of one's defects or shortcomings. So somebody who's humble has an awareness of their shortcomings or defects and is able to show other people that they have that awareness. And humility is really vital in recovery because, like, how can somebody help an alcoholic who can't even acknowledge that they need help? They're just really not going to let it in. But the problem is that when we allow others to see our shortcoming, it results in even more shame. So we might have shame that results from childhood messages, consistent childhood messages that we don't measure up. It could be from, that inadvertent message from our parents that, our imperfections means that we're not good enough, and here's what you do to sort of strive to be more perfect. Or whether it's that we've done so many bad things that we eventually become, we eventually start feeling like we're bad people. Whatever the source of shame is, then we come into treatment, and these doggone counselors want us to talk about all that stuff, and it brings up even more shame. So what happens is, since many alcoholics and addicts are intolerant of the emotion of shame, they end up putting a mask of grandiosity that says, nope, I'm actually doing okay over here. They can't handle the shame associated with having or showing this consciousness of their shortcomings, so they put a mask of grandiosity that says, I'm okay over here. I don't really need all of that. And so what it looks like here is you got, as you can see on the screen here, so you got humility, right? Which when I'm showing other people that I have shortcomings, it leads to shame. And people that are intolerant of shame, they don't do humility. They go, nope, I can't handle this. And so they put a mask of grandiosity on, and it really closes them off for help. So in its mild form, grandiosity manifests as I'm just fine over here. I don't really need to do all that stuff. I'm okay. I'll be fine. Some people need to do that, not me. But it's at its extreme, the person's very arrogant and pompous. It's like, I'm actually not okay. I'm actually better than all of you. There's nothing you have that I want. In fact, if you play your cards right, I'll show you how to do it. We all love the grandiose person. So I like to look at this as opposite ends of a continuum. You might need this for the post-test too, right? So humility and grandiosity are at opposite ends of the continuum. So let's say grandiosity is over here. So I'm actually better than all of you. I'll show you how to do it. I don't need anything that you have. And then as you move over toward the humility end of the, so that's the end, the extreme. So and as you move over here toward, toward humility, it's like, okay, I got a couple issues. It's really not that big of a deal. I'm not as bad as you think I am. I'm okay. I'll be fine. And then as you move over here to humility, it's like, my life is a mess. Please help me. I don't know what I'm doing in regards to sobriety. Show me how to do this, please. So it's easy to see that the person who is over on the humility side of things is going to be much more receptive to help. And so, we really want to meet clients where they're at, right? One thing that I really am very happy about in our profession, and I think some of this has to do with just we're evolving when we're finding out what works, and we're becoming more trauma informed, and also, a lot of the counties have this Medi-Cal waiver where the counties are, at least here in California, are managing care, and they're really insisting on a person-centered care rather than a program-centered care. We're really doing a much better job, I think, and I really like the movement of we're moving from a program-centered to person-centered care. Program-centered being like, okay, look, we've been doing this for 40 years. We know our program works. So if you do what we're suggesting, you too will get sober, right? Well, what if the person came to your program and they don't even want to be sober? What if they came to the program because the judge is saying you're going to do time, or the spouse is saying we're going to get a divorce, or the employer is saying you're going to have to find another job. Doctor says you're going to die. Your liver's given out. So what if they're there for that reason? So let's say I do an assessment and I go, okay, well, based on this assessment, kind of looks like you need to get sober. Who have I aligned myself with there, right? Well, I've aligned myself with the judge or the employer and everybody else that thinks that they need to be sober, right? So, if I'm aligned with these other people who think they need to get better, I just become one of them. Well, if I do the assessment and say, okay, well, we've got this assessment and there seems like there's some issues there, what would you like to get out of this? Well, I just don't want to go to jail. Oh, so you're not here to get sober, you just don't want to go to jail. They're like, yeah. Okay, great. You know what? We can help you with that, because that judge or that DCFS, child services person that sent you here, they trust our program, and they know that if you go through this program, you're going to get a lot of information about your use patterns, about how, coping skills and learning about the disease, and kind of realizing a little better about, how you operate. And so once you get that information, they're saying if you get that information and you stay sober, then you won't have to go to jail, or you might get your kids back. And so you know what? We're going to help you with that. So you do this program, you get what they want you to be getting out of this, and we're going to be able to write you this real kick butt letter that says, yep, they did our program, and hopefully you won't have to go to jail. How's that sound? Sign me up. That's what they're here for, right? And I might add something like, well, and you know what? This doesn't need to be a waste of time for you. You're going to learn a lot of really good information that you may be able to use, just whether or not you decide on sobriety or not. But your decision to be sober over the long term is really going to be up to you. So now who have I aligned myself with? I've aligned myself with the client who doesn't want to go to jail, right? And that helps you to develop what we call Therapeutic Alliance. So if I've aligned myself with the client and they get that I want to help them achieve their goals, now we've developed this relationship, this therapeutic relationship, this alliance. And there are studies that show that Therapeutic Alliance is the #1 determiner of success in treatment. Anyway, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but the reason I brought this up is that if a client is coming and they just have so much there's a grandiosity level that's not going to result in them seeing that they need any help or doing any of these assignments that we might have in mind for them. If you give somebody maybe a history and consequences assignment or or a step one or something like that, and they're like not in a place at all, they're even open to the possibility that there's a problem, it's going to be a blank sheet that you come up with. So it may be that we need to start with maybe addressing the grandiosity. Here's one thing that I used to do in addressing the grandiosity was to actually, let me just check the time how we're doing here, is to actually give them a grandiosity assignment. And so in the grandiosity assignment might be that I would have them read an article called King Baby. Some of you may be around long enough to remember that. This King Baby was actually written by somebody who could relate with the grandiose person, kind of connects with them in the article. And, you know, this is what we do, and, you know, we're all at it, and then proceeds to kind of tear apart, if you will, what it is they're actually doing by putting on that mask of grandiosity. So they learn about it, and then I'll also write into the treatment plan, you know, to write 10 examples of grandiosity in their life. And usually after doing these readings, they can usually come up with maybe 4 or 6 of them. But you can bet that the group members will be more than happy to help them with the other 4 or 6 of them. So now what usually happens is, my experience is when giving such an assignment, they go from like this extreme grandiosity, and now they're starting to move toward humility. Okay, I may have a couple of problems, but it's really not that big of a deal. And that's different from, I ain't got any issues, I'm actually better than all of you. Now we got something to work with, right? So the tendency to mask that, you know, to use the mask of grandiosity to accept shame is further evidence of the importance of learning how to feel and experience uncomfortable emotions like shame. And we'll get a little more into that. But so what happens is, if we are able to equip people with tools of recovery that will allow them to experience the uncomfortable feeling of shame, here's more what it looks like now. So they get humble, they're able to show who they are, it leads to the shame, but now they have coping skills to go ahead and feel the shame, which allows them to do what I call mastering shame. We'll get to that in a moment, and which opens the person up to help, okay? So now, according to Brown as well, she basically says that, her definition of shame is really a fear of disconnection. Remember earlier on I said we're going to remember that term, disconnection. So she says that shame is like, if other people see my stuff, I won't be worthy of connection. And I've always kind of known this. I've always kind of known that I have held people back from me emotionally because I didn't want them to see what I see about me. And I really knew, and even, you know, in early recovery, I became more aware of it, that I you know, or maybe initially aware of it in early recovery, that that's what I do. I hold people at bay so they can't see what I see. But what I didn't really realize for the longest time was, if people see what I see, they won't want to connect with me. They won't want to have anything to do with me, right? And so Brown says that you know, that shame really is that fear of, like, if you see me, if you really see me, you won't want to connect with me. And so she says we need to be seen to have connection. She says that not only do we need to be seen, but we need to be deeply seen, vulnerably seen, and believe that we're good enough to be seen. And she says that we need to get rid of who we should be for who we are so we can connect. And so here it is. Here's the punchline of the whole thing, that Brown, according to her research, says that empathy is the antidote for shame. She says that if you put the secrecy and silence and judgment in a petri dish, you know, where you grow cultures, and you douse it with empathy, it just can't survive. She says the 2 most powerful words somebody can hear from another human being who is talking about their shame is, the 2 most powerful words we can hear is "me too." Yeah, I can relate. I get it. I understand you. And she says that is the antidote for shame. And she says that you know, the vulnerability is the path to that. You know, if we really stand back and look at this for a minute, this you know, empathy being the antidote to shame. You know, we mentioned earlier, you know, what an important step the 5th step was, you know, when we do this moral inventory and we share it with another human being who, again, remember, is typically another alcoholic or addict, somebody who can understand what we're going through, who's not going to think we're a freak, somebody who can validate us, somebody who can empathize with us, somebody who maybe will share a Me Too story. And I had contended that, wow, that's, I think, why that is such a powerful step. I think we could even step back even further and look at how AA even started. You know, some of you might have heard me tell this little AA conception story. Well, before, in a nutshell, Bill W. was this, New York stockbroker who basically had, I need to take a look at my time again here, you guys. Sorry. Where's my pointer? I'm just going to move this over. Okay, so, Bill W. is this New York stockbroker who basically had alcoholism and nobody knew what to do with it. They used to put people in insane asylums. I know this because I did some research on my family tree, and my great-great-great-grandfather in Germany was actually put in an insane asylum where he died, and they buried him out in the backyard. So nobody knew what to do with alcoholism. And so Bill W., he ended up, he was having these conversations with a guy from the Oxford group, which was actually a Christian organization. And as a result of these conversations, he had what he calls a spiritual experience. He was just like stricken sober somehow. And so now he's sober, and he was sober for a little while, and he was at this hotel, and there was a bar, and he wanted to drink, but he just felt compelled. He felt like, to avoid this drink, he just needed to talk to another alcoholic who could understand what he's going through. And so he looks down, and there's this phone and a church directory at this hotel, and he just picks up the phone and just starts dialing these churches and says, hey, do you know any alcoholics like this? And he would kind of describe it a little bit. And call after call, nobody really knew anybody. And then he got a hold of this one woman who said, yes, I know just such an alcoholic. And so he hooked Bill Wilson up with this doctor, an Akron physician called Dr. Bob Smith, and so Dr. Bob, as we call him, was basically on his deathbed. He was dying of alcoholism, and so Bill goes and visits him and tells his story to Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob is like, oh my gosh, I have never heard anybody talk about alcoholism, talk about what I'm going through in a way that makes me remotely feel like they know what they're talking about and they know what I'm going through. And this man has just told me his story, and he gets it. He understands what I'm going through. And then so Dr. Bob felt comfortable enough to share his story with Bill W., right? And this first meeting between those two men is affectionately known as the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So these two guys are now sober, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to keep it. And so while they're trying to figure that out, the help AA number 3 and AA number 4 is, and what they found is what was keeping them sober was helping other alcoholics, and AA was born. So if we take this empathy as the antidote to shame and put it on that model, doesn't it appear that that's why AA works? That it was one alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic who can provide the empathy, who gets it, who understands their pain, who understands what they're going through and are still validated and still loved on, and they're willing to go through it with them. That's empathy. So I really think that Brown is onto something here. I mean, she found through her research that empathy is the antidote to shame. And when we talk about what's going on with ourselves, to people who don't really get it and understand it, they just think we're crazy. That doesn't work. But when we talk to somebody who really gets it and really understands it, that is what works, seems to work for the alcoholic and addict. And that's why we have those people go to meetings and develop a sober support system, so they get uncomfortable if you talk to somebody who can really understand what we're going through. So, and she says that vulnerability is the path to this, getting open with another person who can truly understand. Okay, so I put this slide in here. Brown talks about when we numb those uncomfortable feelings, we're not only numbing the uncomfortable feelings, we're actually numbing the positive things like joy and gratitude and happiness. So some person might think, well, I numb my uncomfortable feelings successfully with alcohol, and even maybe if they don't really have the consequences that would drive them into treatment. what's really happening is the richness out of their lives is really taken away because they're not really experiencing joy, gratitude, or happiness either, right? And so when we stop numbing, we not only, need to feel and experience those uncomfortable emotions, but we also, as a bonus, we get to feel joy, gratitude, and happiness. And boy, that sometimes takes some getting used to as well. So I just thought that was something important for us to have a look at. So in summary, in regards to this shame resilience theory section of this, Selva came up with some points that I thought were really good. He says that the best way to respond to shame is to recognize the internal and external factors that lead to it. We talked a little bit about the causes of shame here, and then we discussed this and the feelings themselves with others. And what happens is that leads to empathy and connection and power and freedom, which are really the opposites of shame. And the more we experience the shame resilience, or more that we practice this SRT and go from feeling isolated and powerless to feeling connected and powerful, the more we all benefit. And if we practice it, we'll find ourselves more resilient in the face of shame. We can handle it better, and we won't suffer so much from it. And they go 12-step on us by saying if we're available for other people's shame, that really helps us build our own resilience to shame. So here's my original slide, excuse me. Before I read that shame is the antidote for, empathy is the antidote for shame, according to Brown. Learning how to live with shame is largely accomplished with the help of a sober support system. So let's talk a little bit how we can foster that in the treatment milieu. So I first want to tell you that when I'm doing a group, I'm like Tigger. I pounce. If there's a feeling that comes up in group, there's just no better place for us to go. Because if alcoholics and addicts run from uncomfortable emotion by drinking and using, then shouldn't a primary task as a chemical dependence counselor and as a treatment center for chemical dependence, shouldn't a primary thing be creating an environment that's safe enough to feel and experience uncomfortable emotion, and showing them that they actually have the ability to do that and not have to use and get through and kind of get on the other side of it? Of course it is. So really, what we want to do is create that kind of environment. We want to create a safe enough environment where they can experience and talk about and feel uncomfortable emotion and see that they can do it. So let's just say somebody is talking about just something really super painful, whether it's shame or grief, and they're really just feeling it, whether they're fighting back tears or they're actually experiencing them. And then we, as the counselor, we want to kind of lean into that with them. We want to go there with them. Don't be one of those counselors that when our client is feeling uncomfortable emotion, we want to just take them up to their head by saying, well, did you call your sponsor, or what do you think about how you deal with this in AA, or whatever, where we're meeting them on like an intellectual level. Our clients need more than that. And so what we want to do is we want to lean into that, right? And we want to let them know that we're willing to go there with them. And man, that must be really difficult for you. Tell me more about that. What does that feel like? That just must be so hard. And we get them talking about it and really feeling it, right? And as we're staying present for the client, we're kind of, observing the group as well to see what's going on with others. And if it's something really painful, there may be other people in the group that are really feeling it too. You might see them starting to tear up a little bit. So once you have allowed this person to really feel and experience that, when you feel like the time is right, you might say, hey, Julie, what's going on for you over there? And then you have Julie now emoting and talking about it. Now you've got multiple people in the group talking about uncomfortable emotions, and then what's happening for the rest of the group, and then so you can say, okay, well, let's provide some feedback to this original person. So what happens inevitably is the feedback is, wow, that must have been really difficult, and yeah, I've experienced something like that too, or thanks so much for trusting us with that information, or wow, that's such good progress for you to be talking about that, because when you first got here, you didn't want to talk about anything. And, thanks for trusting us with that information. What courage it took to, talk about that stuff. And they're basically just loved on by the group. And you see this person who was experiencing this very high level of whether it's shame or grief or whatever the emotion is. And through this love and support from the group, you just kind of see them, you know, calm down and, oh, and you observe this person who is feeling a super big amount of shame or grief or whatever it is, to just kind of being okay. And then so that's an important process enough, but what's as important, I think, is having them recognize what they just did. Wow, do you see what you just did? You just talked about some really painful stuff openly in this group. And we were experiencing a really high level of pain. And then, like, you talked about it here in the group, and we processed it and got on the other side of it, and look at you. You actually look like you're doing okay. So we showed, and so that should show you that you have the ability to feel and experience a very high level of pain and be able to get on the other side of it. And you don't have to use drugs to get there. And then we take it to the next level. And do you see how you did that? You did it with the help of your sober support system. And we take it to the next level. That's why we have you go to those outside meetings. That's why we want you getting phone numbers and developing this sober support, so that when you get an uncomfortable feeling out there, you emulate just what you did here in group. You get with your sober support system, you dial up, whether it's going to a meeting or making a phone call, you get with your sober support, you get loved on, you get validated, you get empathy, and you get on the other side of it just like you did in here. So in summary, you guys, we are basically creating a safe environment to feel. We notice when they're feeling, we go there with them, we empathize with them, we put it out to the group. The group eventually, inevitably, will love on them and provide them, you know, validation and love and empathy and support. And they get on the other side of it, and then we show them what they did. They experienced uncomfortable emotion of shame, got on the other side of it, and then we show them how they did it, which was the help of sober support, and we translate that out into their environment of how they actually practically apply this to their daily living outside of group by connecting with them, emulating just what they did in here. So our groups, you guys, really are the training ground for our clients to learn that they can feel and experience uncomfortable emotion without drinking and using. I just don't think there's a more important thing that can happen in our groups. Yes, of course, we need to teach them the tools of recovery, but that's all part of this. That's why we're teaching them the tools of recovery, so they can get through uncomfortable feelings like shame or anger or grief or fear or and the inherent craving for their drug that typically stems from those uncomfortable feelings. Okay, so see how we're doing on time here. Okay, so all right, so now let's, what I would like to do here, and by the way, just in regards to the importance of this, I do a lot of group evaluations for programs. It's really one of my favorite things. I mean, other than probably public speaking, that's probably my second favorite thing to do. I mean, I like my private practice too, but I really like getting into groups and working with counselors and helping them enhance their skills. And almost to a person, the focus on feeling and experiencing uncomfortable emotions in groups, there's just almost not even a consciousness of the importance of it. It's really kind of mind-blowing to me, even because if alcoholics and addicts run from uncomfortable emotions by drinking and using, shouldn't that be like primary? I think part of it might be that there's this fear of maybe going beyond our scope of practice, and I get it. Going beyond our scope of practice is, you know, when we're, you know, I mean, when we're maybe trying to help them resolve their childhood issues that might lead to this. Like if we're going back and having them visit their childhood and their abuse and their trauma, so they're resolving some of these issues that lead to the shame. Now that's going beyond our scope of practice. That's for a therapist. But what we're doing, remember, as alcohol and drug counselors, is we're helping to stop the bleeding. Right? If our clients don't get and understand that they can feel and experience uncomfortable emotion and learn how to do that, which is largely accomplished through the sober tools that we're teaching them, including building and developing a sober support system, then they're not going to be able to stay sober long enough to be able to even get to therapy, right? So it's super important that we are creating an environment safe enough to feel and having them process it and getting the support so they can understand that that feeling is something that they can do. They no longer have to shut it down anymore. They can embrace it. They can feel it with the help of their sober support and actually get on the other side of it. And it's that, so that's where we kind of started this thing with, it's not resolution of issues that's important and primary in chemical dependence treatment. It is learning how to feel and experience the emotions that come from those issues, right? Our lives are full of issues. These feelings are constantly going to be coming. We need to learn how to feel them. We need to teach our clients how to feel them. And that, I believe, is key in chemical dependence. It doesn't mean we don't do all that other stuff we do, but we need to notch up. We need to ramp up what we're doing in our groups. And so I would just encourage you guys, if you're doing groups, to really go more Tigger, right? If you see an uncomfortable emotion, go there with them. And another thing, and I'll just, some people, once they realize this, they can just go there and they're able to do it. There's other people that have a harder time with it. Sometimes it might be because they're not used to meeting people on an emotional level. Maybe they're just not, that's not kind of, something that comes natural to them. If it doesn't come natural, we gotta force it a little bit, you guys. Our clients need this. So when they're coming to us on an emotional level and feeling, we might get really uncomfortable because we're not used to doing this. But we need to overcome that and go there with them. We need to overcome our uncomfortability of meeting a client on an emotional level and go ahead and feel with them. And, I don't really doubt that when you get into this profession, we care about our clients. We really do. Now, I don't think they should need to guess about that. I think it should be very apparent through the way that we're treating them that we really care about them. So if I really care about a client and they're talking about me, that's something that's painful, that should touch me, right? If I really care about this person and they're talking about some really painful stuff and they're really feeling and they're bringing me into that, that should touch me. I should be moved by that. I don't need to run from or like not show the client a tear if that's what's happening for me. Heck, I think that's modeling uncomfortable emotion. Now, this isn't like me losing it, right? This isn't Bob getting into Bob's stuff and that's what's happening for me. No, I'm still present with the client and I'm still feeling their stuff. I don't go too far because I need to keep that therapeutic, distance in that, so I'm not, becoming too invested in their recovery because then I can't be an objective counselor. So I need to be aware of that, but I can certainly be a good, stable rock of a counselor, somebody who they can rely on me to be there and to not lose it. I can still be that counselor and still feel, right, and not lose it and get into my own stuff. In fact, that might be even a sign of even more solidness as a counselor, where I can actually go there with them and not lose it. And once that plays itself out and once we bring the group in, then maybe we can go to our head and talk about, more about the tools of recovery or how they're going to stay sober, going through what they're going through and stuff like that. But the initial is going there with them, going there with the emotion with them, bringing the client and bringing the clients into it. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So just have that on your radar. Have that as an important part of what you're doing in a group, is to allow clients the ability and the knowledge that they can feel and experience uncomfortable emotions without drinking and using. Okay, let's move over to the shame monster, and we'll kind of, we'll kind of ramp down here. We've got about 10 minutes or so left. So the shame monster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you an experience that I had that was really life-changing for me. It was at a conference called the Evolutions conference over here in LA. It was over by the LAX airport, and it was a conference or a talk that I went to guy by the name of Alan Berger, excellent therapist. I just got to call his name out because he's just so good, and he's written books. Google him, really, really good stuff. But anyway, he was doing a talk with a friend of his from Tennessee, Tom. Oh my gosh, I should have wrote his last name down. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, what they were doing is they were comparing their theoretical orientation. Like one of them was a Gestalt therapist, another was more experiential, and they had this subject. It was, I don't know if it was a past client or what, where this guy came from, or it was an actor or what. But they started working with this person, and in the midst of working with this person, they were talking about the sources of shame from his childhood, and they actually labeled the source of shame that he took with him into his adulthood, and they named it. They called it the shame monster. And so what they did is they actually did a role play where he was actually sitting there and having a conversation with the shame monster. And it was like this calm conversation going back and forth between this guy and his shame monster. And I just remember thinking to myself, how is he having a calm conversation with his shame monster? And so during the Q&A, I raised my hand. I was like, you know, I just marveled at how you were able to have a calm conversation with your shame monster. Because if I was having a conversation with my shame monster, it wouldn't be looking like that. It would be a lot more volatile. And so Dr. Berger says, well, you know, we need a volunteer for the afternoon session. How about you? And I'm like, no. And so I was like, I agreed to it. And so there's like 60 people in the room. There's like, you know, we're all in the middle, and then there's like kind of 3 deep around with, you know, 50 or 60 people in the room. And so, you know, we're in the middle there, and, you know, they did a little bit of groundwork and got a little bit of my history, which I was okay with talking about. And then they, you know, and then so we identified, you know, my shame monster. And so the first thing they did was they said, okay, who in the audience would you like to be your inner child? And so I picked an old student of mine that he used to stay after class, and we used to talk about some pretty deep stuff. And so I felt safe with him. So I had him come up, and they said, okay, well, where do you want to put him? And I was like, okay, how about right here? And so they said, okay, what do you want to say to your inner child? Well, those of you who know me and have heard me talk before and know how emotional I can get, I just lost it. I just was breaking down. I could not even talk. I was sobbing because here I was getting ready to engage in a conversation with that 10-year-old boy who didn't get what he needed, who was abused physically, emotionally, verbally. And now me as adult Bob, I'm getting ready to have a conversation with him. What do you say to this kid? And so by the time when I gained my composure, I finally said something like, you know, I'm sorry you had to experience all that. I'm sorry you were treated that way. You didn't deserve it. You're a good boy and I love you. Something like that. And I'm just gushing the whole time. And so we did this for a while. And then they said, okay, who do you want to be your shame monster? And so now I need to be a little more careful, I think, with this one, because this was going to get ugly. And I certainly didn't want to have anybody that I knew be the shame monster. So I picked this guy in the back of the room, you know, and he stands up. He's like 6'5". I'm like, great. So he comes up and they said, okay, where do you want to put him? And I was like, okay, how about right here? And so Dr. Berger says, that's interesting. You're kind of one step ahead of us. Do you realize that you put yourself between your inner child and your shame monster? And I said, yeah, I actually was aware that he did that. And they said, okay, now what do you want to say to your shame monster? And I just kind of stood up and I said, you know, leave the kid alone. Stop with the lies. That's a bunch of crap. And I got done and they're like, really? Is that all you got? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I thought you were going to let him have it. I said, you really want me to let him have it in front of all these people? He says, yeah. Like full on, no holds barred. Yes. Profanity allowed. Yes. Like, all right. So I get up and I'm like, I just like really let him have it. I mean, full on, no holds barred, just like really let him have it. People really got to see my anger. And so we did that for a minute, and then they said, okay, now go talk to your inner child. And I was like, don't worry, don't listen to the lies. This is just a bunch of stuff that he's talking. Don't believe it. You're a good boy. I love you. Now go talk to your shame monster. I told you, leave the kid alone. That's a bunch of crap, you know. And so just like letting him have it. And then they said, okay, now talk to your inner child. And again, it was something like, you know, don't worry, bud. I got this. Don't worry about it. So we did this a few times, and there was some other aspects to it, which I don't have time to go into right now. But during the Q&A, the people the audience marveled at how I was able, with just like on cue, I was able to just go from this like tenacious, protecting, defending parent, and just at the snap of a finger, just on demand, able to go to this loving, nurturing parental, figure, just like that. And then so they did some closure and stuff, but I just remember getting out of there and going, what in the heck just happened in there? And I was really, I knew something like big happened there for me. And then the next day I went and saw a speaker by the name of Stephanie Covington, and she talks about women's issues, another great speaker. And she basically said that one of our shortcomings as a profession is we don't pay enough attention to women's issues, which I tend to agree with. But on this particular occasion, I was feeling the shame. I just felt like she was being particularly shaming to our profession. And I didn't get up and I didn't do this, but I found myself going, no, stay back. I'm not going to let you shame this kid, this poor boy. And it suddenly clicked. It was like, oh my gosh, these two awesome counselors pulled out of me stuff that goes on inside me, right? I've got this part of me, the shame source that consistently beats me up and tells me what a piece of junk I am. And then I've got this wounded inner child that gets hurt by that. And they put me in a position to be an adult to fend off my shame monster and protect my inner child. And so I do this now when I'm feeling a source of shame. I say, no, wait, back off. And then I'm able to have a conversation with my inner child. So when something from my environment activates my shame or trauma of my childhood, I get knocked right off my program center, right? And it's like, so when it happens, it's really weird, because in my head I know this is complete BS. I know this is untrue about me. Don't listen. Yet, right here, this is where I wear my shame. This is where I feel it physically. I'm still feeling it. So even though I know it's a lie, I still feel like that. And that's a long 12 inches to bring together. And so I know when I know it here, but I'm feeling it here, I'm no longer at adult Bob. I've been knocked off my adult center, and now I'm young Bob. I'm that 10-year-old boy who didn't get what he needed, who was abused, who was left to think that he just doesn't measure up, right? And I know I've gotten there. And then my job at that point is to recognize that's what's happened. I've been knocked off my adult center, and then doing what I have to do to work myself back from young Bob over to adult Bob. And that's the true measure of my recovery in this, is A, how quickly do I recognize it? And B, how long it takes me to get back from young Bob to adult Bob. And do you know what I do to get from young Bob to adult Bob? I sure hope you have the answer to this, because it's the theme of this whole talk, is I get on the phone with another alcoholic who can truly understand what I'm going through and give me the empathy and love that I need to move me from young Bob back to adult Bob. And that's how I do it. And so I hope that has helped, that piece has helped you. And you can do this in sections. You can. I talked to Dr. Berg. I wasn't sure, like, is that really in our scope? And he explained it in a way that I really do think it is, actually. And, just like, my counselors had me write a resentment letter to my dad and read it to an empty chair. I mean, this is just that same kind of stuff. So I do want to move on and tell you just a little bit about mastering shame. So mastering shame, what I mean by that is, so when I am mastering shame, basically, instead of like, I got an uncomfortable feeling, run, it looks more like this. Boom, the uncomfortable feeling hits and I go, oh, crud. Here's another one of those uncomfortable feelings. Darn, I'm gonna have to feel this for a minute. And then I go, well, I better dial up my higher power and my sober support system, because it's gonna be uncomfortable for a while. And then I work my program and I feel it and I get on the other side of it and I'm okay. That's what we call mastering shame, you guys. So I hope you found this useful. I really appreciate and I'm honored that you would come to my talks for your continuing education. And again, so when we close this out, I want you to email me at staysober@bobtyler.net, and I will email you your post-test and survey. And then when you email your answers back to me, I will give you your CE certificate. So thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you guys. Bye-bye.